Good afternoon, everybody. So great to see such a full screening room like this. It warms my heart. My name is Dave Karger. I'm from Turner Classic Movies, and I have the pleasure of introducing 5 of the very impressive members of the cast and crew of this lovely film, The Tender Bar. So please help me welcome them. First off, the national treasure that is Christopher Lloyd. Also with us, the fabulous Lily Rabe. Come on out. Great to see you. The wonderful Ty Sheridan. Since we're at a Screen Actors Guild event, I will say 2-time Screen Actors Guild Award winner, Ben Affleck. Nice to see you.
Hey.
How are you?
Good.
And the co-producer and director of the film, a 4-time Screen Actors Guild Award winner, George Clooney.
4.
Yes, Ben, he won 4. ER ran for a long time.
Yes, man. I stand on the shoulders of...
Ben and George, my understanding is that both of you have kind of Uncle Charlie type figures from your own lives, and that's one of the reasons that this film was attractive to both of you. So Ben, for you, who was the closest to an Uncle Charlie?
Well, the film was attractive to me because the part was so good and because George was directing it. You know, and it's really the only time in my whole career that, you know, just sort of like from heaven, somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, do you want to take this great part with George Clooney directing?" I mean, Gone Girl was a similar. I was like, Dave Fincher, really? Okay, and it was this with George, and I was just I would have played, you know, a whole range of roles for George. So it was a bonus that it was such a special role, and it was the guy was actually he's sort of like a lot like sort of who my dad kind of imagined himself to be in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? Like my father was a bartender. He was a working guy. He was a very well-read autodidact with a lot of opinions. And my daughter says that she read the script. She said, "Oh, you're just playing yourself?" I said, "What do you mean?" She was like, "Well, this character just stands there and sermonizes to people the whole time, just like you do." So.
And George, what about yourself?
I modeled it after Ben. No, you know, I have an Uncle George, who I was named after, strangely. And I grew up in Kentucky, in a small town in Kentucky, and he ran he lived above a bar that looked a lot like this, only a little more dangerous. And so it had the jukebox and the cigarette machine, and I would have to go down and, you know, get cigarettes and sit at the bar because that was summers. You know, I was working at the racetrack with my uncle. So there was and you know, I'm the same age as the kid is. You know, so all the music, all those elements were still a really, you know, a deep part of me. I remember when we were doing the cigarette thing, and the kid's going to buy cigarettes, and you know, they were like going to charge him like $7 for a pack of cigarettes. I was like, no, it was like 45 cents for a pack. That, you know.
George and I spent a disturbing amount of time being like, "Remember that? Yeah, I remember that." The two really familiar with.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, that part.
As someone who grew up in New York, not too far from Long Island, I feel like the accents just sounded dead on to me. And then I learned that it was filmed in Massachusetts, which, Ben, for you must have been really kind of this very strange confluence because it's your home area, but yet you can't do the accent that you would think you'd be doing in Massachusetts. You're doing Long Island. How did that all play out?
To be honest, you know, it was just kind of guided by George. It was, what do you want? How do you want it to sound? What do you want? You know, how do you see it? And I have never, ever, ever gotten better, more helpful, smarter notes from a director on one day, like a whole movie, than I would from George every day. Wow. George being an actor, understanding how to play and nuance. So, thank you. It's going to be a long process. And but it's true. But someone who's done it and done it so well, there's such a shorthand of like, no, it's not. And George is the kind of notes where he tell you, and halfway through it, you're like, God damn it, I know. Yes, you're right. Okay, yeah. And so it's just really, really easy to follow his lead, and I really trusted him. And he had, I mean it. It's like, that's a shame for George that I'm going to get credit for this choice. But you know, it was in suburban Massachusetts, which is sort of near a fancy area that I had never even been to when I was growing up. So it wasn't like I was staying at home or really even in a place that I was connected to. And sets are kind of insular places. There was a lot of on a sound stage. And so it was really the environment that George created and the characters that these other brilliant actors all created. It was very easy to fit into.
Ty, I think there's a great history of kind of the parental interrogation scenes in movies where, you know, you meet the potential in-laws. I'm thinking of John Cusack in Say Anything. I don't want to buy anything bought, processed, or sold, or, you know, the Gary Cameron Crowe script. And I love the scene where you're meeting Sydney's parents, and just, I feel like that's such a great turning point for JR, where he just realizes that he can have this confidence and not care. What did you like about that scene, and what are your memories of shooting that great moment?
I can tell you what I disliked the most was eating a strawberry scone for like 7 hours straight. And we shot the scene in the morning, and by the time lunch came around, my stomach hurt so bad, I just had no appetite. I was like, oh, dude, so glad we're finished with that scene. But yeah, no, I mean, that was a lot of fun. I think
These younger actors haven't learned not to eat in the scene yet.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
no,
by the way,
no.
watch Ben in the scene where he says, "Eat your cereal," and then he takes a bite, and it's like this.
Always, every scene you're either about to start or just finished eating.
I think I had no choice in this one. It's just like...
Paid your dues. Like,
So much of it, though, Ty, is on your face.
Yeah.
And that's what I just love, because you see this man, this young man, you know, kind of realizing some of his power in a way. It's just so cool to watch it on without even the dialogue. So great job. And Lily, as I told you out there, and I told you, George, on email, I want a sequel of just Dorothy. I want to know even more about her. She's so plain spoken. She's so no nonsense. What was your favorite part about embodying her?
I love how much hope she has, almost in spite of herself, and there's so much inevitability to so many of her circumstances and what keeps happening, but each time she just completely eliminates that. And each time it's going to be different, and we're going to have a different outcome. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And I loved getting to play that, because I think it's so complete for her. She's not sort of hedging there. She's just fully committed to things. Things are going to get better even when they don't.
That's good optimism to have on these days. Christopher, what was your reaction when you read the script, particularly the moment which I love so much, where Grandpa decides to take JR to the father-son breakfast event? I think it just speaks so much to his character. What was your reaction when you read that and read that moment?
At first, I thought it was kind of contradictory to everything else he did, but I saw it. You know, he really, and there are a couple of other moments earlier on where he signals his love for the boy, and so I thought it was a great moment. I feel it was. I also feel it wasn't that really difficult for him. Once she said, "Well, why didn't you take him?" What about that? You know, it's like, yeah. And he goes up and cleans himself up, and off they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, he cares. He has maybe some difficulty expressing that, but it's so.
Ben, can you tell us the story of you as a 12-year-old seeing Christopher Lloyd, I guess, on the street as a big Back to the Future fan?
Chris is the first celebrity I ever saw. I had just seen Back to the Future, and I remember riding the subway clearly thinking to myself, that is the best movie I've ever seen. Like I thought, look, this is my favorite movie. It was 12, and not that long after that, and I don't, maybe you remember exactly what it was, because I don't know if you were doing something with the ART or the theater company in Boston or something, but I was walking down the street in Boston, and there was, Christopher Lloyd. There was, not from Back to the Future. And I was so starstruck. And so this was, he was doing the thing I wanted to do. It was like a magical being from another world is now in this world that people don't hear. And I followed him for like a couple of blocks, you know what I mean, trying to play it off. And I know that it was probably too close, you know what I mean? And I'm sure, I got that reaction all the time. So it probably was nothing in common for you, but for me, it made a huge impression. And I'm easily, I'm starstruck and intimidated. I'm still intimidated of Chris. It makes me nervous. And so the whole time, I was just nervous. I remember how...
That's why you're sitting down at that end.
But I feel like I want to complete the story. So, Christopher, is there something you would like to say to 12-year-old Ben Affleck who gathered up the nerve to stop you on the street and say, I just want to say I loved Back to the Future and I loved you in it? What would you like to say to him?
Hey, man, let's talk. What would I say? I'd say, what do you have an inclination to be when you grow up? What kind of...
I would have said Marty McFly.
And sort of get into it and hope maybe something would come to mind that could really be a connection and help along the path. That would be cool.
I met Raymond Burr when I was 12, and he told me to fuck off. He did. I was like, hey, Raymond Burr. He's like, fuck off. So you're a much nicer star.
I'm so sorry about that.
It was fine. I was probably stalking him or something.
George, one thing I think is very impressive when I think the 7th movie that you've directed. And if you look at all of them, from Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, Good Night and Good Luck, Suburbicon, Leatherheads, they're all very, very different.
Yeah.
Is there something that now that you've done 7, you were pretty assured already from Confessions of a Dangerous Mind as far as your tone, I think. Is there something logistically about being a director that you're more comfortable with now, having done 7, that maybe you weren't so much on the first or second?
I mean, you're never comfortable. If you're comfortable, you're way out of, you're screwing up. You're constantly in search of things. For me, I think in general, and this is kind of the boring and the weed stuff, but it's just fun to keep trying different things. I fail as much as I succeed in most things as an actor and a director, and that's how you kind of grow. I've learned a lot more from failing than I have from succeeding. And so I always find it interesting to try things and see, dip your toe in and see if you can do it. And you got to, jump in completely, and that's part of the fun of it. I worked with really great directors, the Coen brothers and Soderbergh and Alfonso Cuarón, and they had very similar qualities. They didn't rehearse beforehand. They shot only what they needed. They did very few takes. They shot with a point of view, meaning that you can't get in the editing room and decide to make a different film, which is when you shoot a lot of different angles and things. So actors, I think, as an actor, appreciated that, and so I feel like that's helpful for actors because they know exactly what they're up for. But look, the secret to directing, bottom line, is casting. Period, bar none. A good script, because you can't make a good film out of a shitty script, but you can make a bad film out of a good script. We've seen that. Hey, leave me out of this, okay? And but actors save you all the time. And casting, we cast this kid, Daniel the kid, and that kid's great, isn't he? So I'll give you a quick thing. That kid's never acted before. Ever. He was on TikTok or something, right? Where he was like, he's like the fucking lockdown, the motherfucking like every word that came out of his mouth was foul. And we saw him on Jimmy Kimmel, and I was like, who is this kid? And we got a hold of Jimmy and said, get him onto the phone. We got the kid on the phone, and we read him over Zoom, and we took a chance. and by the way, I was on ER, right? I played a pediatrician. I worked with actor kids. They're like, I had kids, I don't rehearse. I'm like, oh, you don't rehearse? You're 9, you don't rehearse. So all you want is, and this kid is a great kid. And, we did that, the scene you saw where he's driving with Max Martini, which is a great scene. 7-page scene. It's a oneer with no cuts, and we did one take.
What?
And that's it. And that's, what is he, 11, 10? I mean,
Yeah, I know.
couldn't do it with these guys.
And by the way, any former child performers from ER here that want to talk to George?
We'll do a little therapy app.
This is a Screen Actors Guild crowd. Ty, what was it like to do a scene with the actor playing the same character as you? It's such a great scene.
Oh, it was so much fun, and I think that scene wasn't originally scripted. I mean, we got there, we were shooting for 3 or 4 weeks, and then George came up to me, he's like, hey, I'm working on this scene, it's really cool. You're gonna do a scene with Daniel. I was like, oh, really? Like, what? He's like, yeah, it's like a dream scene, he's like telling you to wake the fuck up and, you become a writer, you're not becoming a writer. And I was like, oh man, that's super cool. And just to pay tribute to Daniel, he's such a professional. He was in that scene, I could see him, he's like pouring the coffee, he's resetting things. He's like, this was here, we can make sure this matches the master shot. And he's like 9 years old, and I'm like taking notes from this kid. I'm like, but he was so much fun. He was so, I think he's, just, super wide-eyed, asking questions, wanting to learn. And I started acting when I was 11 years old. So I think, I saw a lot of myself in Daniel, and I was just, it's cool to see someone that's so interested and curious about it and doing such a good job. And yeah, and he's such a good kid. So yeah, it was so much fun. It was Daniel told me, he was like, we finished the scene, he was like, that's the coolest scene in the movie.
Lily, obviously when you have a script by someone like William Monahan, who, by the way, wrote The Departed, won an Oscar, so he knows what he's doing. Is there enough right there to make you feel as an actor that you've got enough of the family dynamic going on? Or do you find it helpful when you have actors playing family members? Are there special things or special things during rehearsal that you like to do to kind of get into that family vibe?
Oh, it depends, but we were very lucky in this one where I felt so much love for these people so quickly, and I think they all, the actors, my family members, it was sort of like all of their eyes were just direct shots to their hearts, and everyone had these open rib cages, and it just felt that way so quickly that falling in love with them in the way that you need to sort of fall in love with family so that you can fall out of love with them and hate them at the same time. And, it was such an easy path to that because of who these people are and who these actors are and who our leader was, because he has that same quality. You're not you don't have to cut through anything of what do you really think and what's really going on. There's no barrier, and so it was easy.
Was it easy to yell at Christopher Lloyd?
Yes.
Good answer.
Christopher, would she come up and give you a hug after screaming at you after a take?
No.
He farts too much. I don't want to go around that guy.
Well, we talk, day to day.
Okay. George, how much fun was it to pick all the great 70s songs?
That was fun.
It's like a character in the movie.
Yeah. Well, there's certain things that'll take you back to a period of time. You need help every once in a while. A director needs help a lot. To put yourself in a period, right? You can help it with the way you shoot it and the way, we used a lot of zooms and rack focus and things, the way films were shot that period of time. But the music and smells are two of those things that can take us back to a minute where you go, oh my God, I remember this. And so the hard part was that this period has been picked apart pretty well from music and other films. So it was about finding songs that we really loved. You know, Ben and I were talking about it, and Grant, as I was the producer, who was here somewhere, who's the best producer in the world, by the way, Grant Heslov, and my oldest and best friend. Yeah, by the way, he loaned me $100 to get headshots in 1982, which I still use.
You should have taken a piece.
Should have gotten a piece. But we would listen to, remember, for a while we tried to do the whole movie with Jackson Browne tunes. It was the whole thing.
It was so much of the fun was listening to all the songs that you were playing with and listening to, and it would help get into the whole film.
Oh, yeah, he would be like, you got to play Opening Farewell. I was like, I'm playing Opening Farewell, what the fuck? But it really was, it was part of the making of the film as we were there. Remember, we were all kind of, well, I think I'm going to have Golden Earring open the movie, and, you know.
Radar Love.
Radar Love, come on. You can't go wrong with that. So it was fun.
That's great. Ben, of course, you're not just an actor, you're a filmmaker, and at that, you're a filmmaker who has directed a Best Picture Oscar-winning film. When you're
Produced by George and Grant.
Right, produced, right, that's true.
I'm sticking with him.
But when you're...
Yeah, but, you know, let's get very clear about one thing. He's the one-time sexiest man alive. I'm two. Just going to say it. Right. Now, he's lobbying. He's running a good campaign this year.
Yeah.
When they came to me a second, a third, a fourth time, I said, let George.
Oh, yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
But what I'm getting at is when you're working with a director who hasn't quite reached that level yet, where he's directed a Best Picture Oscar winner, do you have to kind of hold back from trying to give him advice and saying, you know, when I did it, you might also consider this kind of a shot? No.
No. You know, the only things I've learned about directing, George reminded me a little bit of what he was saying is from the great directors I've worked with, you know, and George, you know, chief among them. It's like I didn't show up knowing how to do anything. I had to learn and watch people and see who was talented and watch what they were doing and watch what Lily's doing and go, okay, I see, that's good, that's the movie, okay, you know, and kind of echolocate that way and just steal things, you know, and so they were viewed like, well, here as I am and I know what I'm doing. I've always benefited from the great single piece of wisdom I have is intelligence to identify people with talent, shut the fuck up and listen to what they have to say. And that has served me very, very well.
Well done.
And in this case, like I learned an enormous amount from George. By the way, George is the most confident, because he's an actor and such a good director, and, you know, and understands what it's like to be an actor. He creates an environment where everybody can succeed. Understanding that like everybody has to succeed. And directors who aren't actors, it's not that they're not compassionate or they don't want you to succeed. They just haven't been there. They don't know what that feels like. They don't know what it's like to hold your sides in your hand and audition for one line. They don't know that, you know, having one day on a movie is harder than being the lead. They don't know that, you know, and George knows all of that stuff. And he knows principally that relaxation and confidence bring out who you are. Like there's no 9-year-old actors, right? It's not 9-year-old Brando. There are people, kids, who can just, you know, access their feelings in themselves and who are comfortable with themselves, but they need an environment where they feel safe and comfortable and part of it, and that's what George created for all of us and helped us sort of create. And so no one succeeds without that. And one of the things I also learned from directing was like, don't set off on your own ship somewhere and go tell the director like, no, the director's gonna sail the boat. If you want to be a part of this and blend into this story and be congruent with what kind of meaning and resonance they're trying to create, you got to get on board with that. So it's not, I've never in my life shown up and been like, hey, you know, how about this? I've just, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? How can I help you? What do you want from me? And tried to, as best I can, attune myself to what they want. And if the director is really, really great, you're just enormously lucky.
That's great. The good news is we have time for questions from you all for this very impressive group. Now, for COVID safety reasons, we're not going to have mics out there, so just project. This is an actors crowd, and I can also repeat the question for people that didn't hear it. So I see a hand right there. You've got blonde hair. Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
thank you. It's not really blonde.
Oh.
I'm blonde.
I'm blind.
Mr. Clooney. You and I were in acting class together 30-something years ago. Mil Casales.
Yep.
And so it's been especially wonderful to see your success. I have no questions except to say thank you.
For those of you who
That was
couldn't
a
hear,
fun class. For those of you who couldn't hear, she said, God, you look fantastic, George. I mean, you're 60, and I've never seen anyone look so young. And I can't believe that was so nice.
Are you only 60?
I'm only 60. Thank you, Ben. By the way, that was a fun class, wasn't it? That was a class, we had an acting class with Milton Katselas, who was a famous acting teacher. And the students in that class and the stuff we got to do in that class was really inventive and interesting. And it was, it was a real good way to learn your trade. So it's good to see you, man.
That's great.
Check in every 30 years or so, will you?
Sir.
Hello, I'm over here.
Over here.
You're left. My name's Matt Valvardi, and I was an investment manager in Philadelphia for about 8 years. Came to here to act at about age 29. The first movie I got to work on was Suburbicon, doing background. So I have been sort of directed by you. I don't know if you recall, but I smoked a cigarette very fake the wrong way, and I was booted to the very, very, very back. So I didn't make the final cut.
George mentioned you to me.
But my question is, I mean, with this amazing cast and movies you've done in the past, is there something about period pieces specifically that really, because I feel like you've done that with this, with Leatherheads, with Suburbicon, that really like draws you, inspires you, fires you up to do more period pieces than something contemporary?
The question is whether there's something about period pieces that really excites him as
Well,
as a
when
filmmaker.
we open, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, good script is all that really matters. I mean, so we're all actors, right? How many times do we read a script where we go, this is great? Most of the time you read it going, all right, I can make that work. I can figure it out. I can make that work. So you have a good script. So sometimes, luckily for me, a lot of them have been period pieces. But you guys, pretty much everybody here's worked on period pieces over the time. And I mean, sometimes it helps with the performance, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because it gives you a lot to like tune into. Like, and if the director's doing specific stuff and giving you a chance, creating the real environment, it's like gives you a thing to focus to and hold. I mean, fortunately, this script also was really substantial and interesting. Yeah. The characters are resonant, but in the case of George says, where the scripts you read, where like I guess some other people talk and then I say this, and then like where it's just very there's not as much there. It can allow you to find some specificity. Which I think is always interesting because it's more real and it's concrete and it can touch people in the simple way of like, oh, I remember that, if the period is recent enough. Or it can create a sense of like, taking you to another world that you haven't been to. But as an actor, I think it can give you something to hold on to, as long as you don't like fall into, isn't it so funny, how we were at that time, because then I think it can be a trap,
Anyone in the back? Yes.
Hey, Lily, I just think you are such an amazing actress. Thank you. When you consider script, what is the role? What goes into a script that really speaks to you?
Question for Lily about what really pulls her into a script and helps her decide what to take on.
It used to be always the role that would lead me, and I would just, whether I wanted to, play this part and tell this person's story. And now it's actually the director first, because I realized I had a couple of experiences where I realized you can't do it alone. So no matter how much I loved a part or loved even a script, if I didn't have someone there to build solid ground for me to walk on, it wasn't going to ever be what I hoped or all of those things that you can't even hope for because you don't know what's going to happen when you have a great leader. So now hopefully it's those two things side by side, but I have learned that you need that person who has a clear vision for what it's going to be. Otherwise, it won't work. So yeah.
Yes, in the front row.
Hi, my name is Jordan Spalding. George, I actually met you at the Catch-22 premiere a couple years ago, very briefly. Anyways, this is for all of you guys. What was the craziest story while filming this movie that happened on set? Like the craziest thing that happened.
Gentleman wants to know what's the craziest things that happen on this set of this film.
I think there were so many crazy stories that you heard, not only about this guy, and telling all of his crazy stories.
Well,
but-
it's tricky. Look, we did this in COVID, right? So we got a mask and a thing and a shield, and so it's like it wasn't the same as hanging out on a set and
No. But it was still a lot of fun.
It was
We
really
had a
fun,
great
but it was
time.
weird to like go and then action, your family, go.
Yeah, it was like really weird. It was like the only time you ever had to take your mask off, and then life was normal. We're all standing around with no masks, and you had like a normal life briefly, and cut! Everyone's wrapped up and entombed, and we're after the, it was like these brief respite of like humanity and life. So yeah, it wasn't too conducive. But George has such fabulous stories and is so entertaining that you kind of got to experience that by proxy just by hearing about like the time he took a shit in the cat box and all that.
I'll go to my grave with that story. No, but it's fun because this really is a family, and they would, once we were on the set, you were able to take off the mask, and we were really not able to move from there. Just having everybody be, in that room, and talking to Christopher about Taxi was some of the most exciting stuff. My God, we used to, Grant and I spent our lives doing like Christopher Lloyd impersonating, okay, doc, It's all we ever did. What do you do on a yellow sign? It's all we ever did. He's our hero. And the idea that we got to sit in a room and listen to him tell stories about, like, we'd ask him a scene, he'd go, oh, yeah. And then he'd tell us a story about this. It was just great fun, and all of these guys are wonderful raconteurs. So it made for funny, the set was very lively, let's just say that.
Chris, for scale of 1 to 10, how good is his Christopher Lloyd?
It's damn good. Damn good. I'm impressed and flattered, I tell you.
You know what? I feel like this movie, just to hear you talk about the conditions under which you made it, this movie is a bit of a small miracle. I congratulate you all. I'm afraid we're out of time, but it's so great to be with all of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Lloyd, Lily Rabe, Ty Sheridan, Ben Affleck, George Clooney, thank you so much. Have a great day.